What's up, Megamaniacs? It's your boy, Mr. MegaManFan. I'm not usually on camera, so I'm going to apologize if this comes off a little awkward, but I had to do something for the 1,000 subscribers special, and I promised the viewers of Saromaru's channel through their Discord that for 1,000 subscribers, I would eat a package of the spiciest ramen you could buy at the Asian food market. Double spicy with a fire-breathing chicken on the front. Stuff is sort of famous for being notoriously hard to eat if you dump in the entire sauce packet. And while it's funny to see a middle-aged white guy try to eat something incredibly hot and spicy and not die, I thought that's just not good enough. I need to do something more than that. So I decided to make this an entire Retro Hunting Adventures episode, and we're going to intersperse the videos of me eating with some video games, some history about those games, and some other things that I think will be of interest to the subscribers to this channel. So hopefully this presentation format works for you, and it's a bit of an experiment on my part, so good or bad, I'm gonna roll with it and hope it turns out well. If it's different from normal episodes or different from your expectations of me eating spicy ramen, that I didn't want to just do an ordinary video. I wanted to try to make it something interesting and fun for everyone. So I hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's get to the introduction courtesy of Megaran.
Yo, this is Megaran, and you need to rock and or roll on over to Mr. MegaManFan's YouTube channel, because it's all that rush to make it happen. Peace!
Let's start with some Famicom games that I picked up at Pop Culture Exchange. Aragus being number one on the list. This was $3.99, and I was very happy to see a shooter in the pile that they had sitting on the counter. Can't really go wrong with an import shooter, or maybe you can. We'll see later on when I do some video gameplay footage. Next up, this is called Yokai Dachuki, or maybe it's Dachuki. I really don't know, and I apologize if I butchered that. But we will also show footage from that game. Before we get to that, I have 4 more Famicom games in here, including this oversized cartridge, which is called Shin Fornin Uchi Mahjong. Yes, it's a Mahjong tile matching game, but the size of the thing attracted me to it because Famicom carts are usually tiny, and that one's the size of a North American NES cartridge. This one's called Oshinbo, and as you might have guessed, it's a cooking game, a game about food. Pretty obvious from the presentation on the label art. I couldn't resist when I saw it looking all pretty like that. Nor could I resist this game with Beat Takeshi on the cover. Yes, the same as Takeshi's Challenge. This one's called Takeshi Lucky Sengoku Adventurer, if you translate it to English. At this point, Tango interrupted the proceedings, so we're going to give him his moment on the camera before I go to the last Famicom game and then show you some of my suffering eating the spicy ramen. Always good to see you, Tango. Thanks for dropping in. The last one features a smiling Japanese businessman on the cover, and is called, well, loosely translated, it's called Matsumoto's Stock Trading Tips. But for now, let's switch over to some footage of me doing something really stupid. Double spicy, extra hot, double spicy, extra hot, double spicy, extra hot, chicken flaming breath coming out of its mouth, ramen noodles. I've prepared a bowl with all of the ingredient packets that come inside, and now, with milk at hand, just in case things go awry, I'm going to try this ramen and see how hot it really is. Anyway, bottoms up. Now the look on my face may read, oh my god, I've made a horrible mistake. But before I give you my reaction to how hot this really is, let's go back to a little bit more of that video game footage. Aragus is a video game developed by Nihon Maihan Kaihatsu in 1985 and licensed to Jaleco in 1986 for release on the Famicom. This is one of the earliest video games that NMK made because the company was founded in 1985. They only lasted 14 years in total, but in that time they did make some very memorable games. If you know my PC Engine series, you've already seen P-47 the Freedom Fighter. You may also know them for Saint Dragon, or perhaps on the Game Boy you would know them for Roland's Curse Parts 1 and 2. Now, I wouldn't say this game is exactly a ripoff of Xevious, but if it does look similar to Namco's 1983 release, it's definitely a spiritual successor or a game designed in the same vein, because you have a gun that shoots directly ahead of you. Whatever targets are in your way, you can hit with that. But you also have a crosshair that you can drop bombs onto ground-based targets that aren't moving around in front of you. And other than the fact that you seem to have a wider playfield to scroll left and right through, I would say it's basically the same game. Different looking levels, different looking enemies, but the design is a spiritual kin to Xevious. And like Xevious, it can be incredibly hard because the ship you're controlling moves very slowly, the enemies that are moving around you are very fast, and it becomes a bullet hell rather quickly when they all start firing at you at once. Now, initially my strategy to defeat that was to simply scroll to the left or the right as far as I could, but then I realized there was no concrete border. It seems like the map just wraps around. If you keep scrolling in one direction, it comes all the way back around to the other. So that ultimately proved to be no help. I can't get away from the enemies no matter where I go. I just have to try to avoid their bullet fire as best I can and still try to hit the ground-based targets at the same time. And in the limited amount of span that I wanted to invest in Argus for this episode of the Retro Hunting Adventures, I couldn't master it that quickly. In fact, I thought I would get some power-ups by hitting ground-based targets, and that didn't even help. I hit one there, clearly, and it didn't give me any improvement on my ship. So now, let's go back to some more of that ramen eating footage.
It's hot. It has more of a kick when it gets to the back of your throat, but it's not unbearable. Got some pieces of chicken that we threw into the pot as well. They're nicely seasoned up by the flavor packets. You know, it's strong, but I honestly thought it was going to be much stronger than this.
Okay, I think you can tell with what happened to my vocal cords there that I'm clearly full of shit, and the spice is affecting me more than I'm willing to let on.
It's not pure heat. There is still flavor there.
And as we stare into the eyes of a man who realizes he's made some bad life choices, let's go back to some more of that video game footage. Yokai Dachuki makes the cut for this week's episode simply by being pick up and play ready to go, not heavy on the Japanese text at all, and easy to understand once you get into it. In fact, I can tell this must have been a pretty popular game because of the fact there were 2 identical copies when I was at Pop Culture Exchange, and honestly, it's not hard to see why. It's a side-scrolling platformer, which originally came out on the Namco Arcade 1 system and was ported to Famicom after that. Your protagonist is, according to the lore, making his way through hell to determine his final fate. But you don't really need to know that to play it. You just have to shoot the enemies that are in your way, collect the items, traverse over obstacles, and explore the world. And even when you drop from a great height, like I did a little bit ago, you don't die. There's no falling damage, so it makes it very easy to just wing your way around, and whatever happens, happens. You just roll with it and figure your way out as you're going along. It's very friendly to the player that way, in that you don't get punished overly for just exploring the world and not knowing where you're going. And it appears that there are multiple branching paths. Not quite figured out the system for following those paths yet, but it doesn't seem like you're limited to exploring hell in just one direction. You can choose whatever path you want to follow, and there will be different monsters blocking your way. There will be frogs that hop around. There will be birds dropping bombs on you. There will be demons that impede your progress. And each one takes a different number of hits from the weapon you're shooting, which apparently is key according to the lore of this game, which I'm assuming is a spiritual energy that you shoot out from your body as you traverse through hell. It's actually kind of surprising that this game is so based on the mythos of the underworld and demons and hell. You might have suspected that from the cover art, given that one of the characters looks like Firebrand from Demon's Crest. You know, the protagonist who used to be the antagonist in Ghosts and Goblins. And Ghosts and Goblins are definitely a factor in this game with a name like yokai. There's spirits, underworld, demons, monsters, all the things you would associate with that genre of anime and that style of video game. So while this is a very easy to pick up and play platformer, I can also see why they would have been very reluctant to port it to the West for North America. We talked about this on our previous episode of Retro Hunting Adventures when I imported a copy of Devil World for Famicom. It was such an easy game to play, would have been perfect to port, but because of the religious iconography in the game, the crosses and such, they weren't even going to try. They had a very strict policy at Nintendo in the 1980s of censoring anything Christian, anything religious, anything that they were afraid would offend people in the Western market. Whether they were oversensitive to this issue or whether they were just under realizing that gamers wanted games and cared more about that than the fact that it had a cross in it or a demon in it or hell in it, I don't know. They might have had the right strategy given that this has always been a very conservative leaning country, especially in parts of the Midwest and the South. But then again, I don't know that anybody could have really recognized in an 8-bit video game that there was anything that overtly Christian in it and taken that much offense to it. But you be the judge. I think it's just fine in this game. I think it's fine in Devil World as well. And I really enjoyed my limited amount of time playing it for this episode of the Retro Hunting Adventures. Enough so that I'll be coming back to play Yokai after this episode is over. Especially since I want to beat that boss. But for now, let's go back to the ramen eating footage.
See if I can get through the whole thing without needing the milk.
There's bravery and then there's stupidity, and what I just said there was flat out stupid.
The chicken helps. It cuts down on the heat a little.
And by a little, I mean not much, because by the end I couldn't wait to drink that glass of milk.
All right. If we hadn't added a protein to it, it would have been much harder.
That much is true, but for now let's go back to some more of the retro hunting footage. I also picked up some instruction manuals while I was there at Pop Culture Exchange, and it starts with Bible adventures. I couldn't resist because those powder baby blue video games are so bad, and this one hilariously says, "Congratulations! You are now in possession in the first of a series of Bible video games from Wisdom Tree." In other words, congratulations, you just bought your kids some crap they'll hate. But Marble Madness, always been a favorite of mine, both in the arcade and the home versions. Didn't have that manual. Surprisingly, I didn't have Tony Hawk Pro Skater for the N64 either, so that was an easy pickup, along with an instruction manual for NBA Live 2000. Whip anybody's ass at NBA Live, as Common would say. But that is not the grand finale of this video. I have a Tomy Pac-Man from 1982. Now the stickers have all worn off it over time, but cosmetically it's still in great shape even without those stickers on the front. And I knew it worked because the owner of Pop Culture put batteries in it and tested it while I was there. And the sound immediately drew me over because when I was a kid, a childhood friend had this very Tomy Pac-Man, and I never got to play it. He'd always say, "When I'm done, it's your turn," but his turn would never end. So getting this was a must-have. I pretty much told the owner on the spot, if you can get this ready before I leave today, I'll take it with me. And he said, let me see what I can do. The batteries were not included, though. I had to pick up a package of 4C batteries just to play it at home. That's not something I plan to do on the regular since it was $8 for 4 batteries, but hopefully these will last a good long time. There also appears to be a power port on the back, but I don't want to just plug a random AC adapter into this and fry it. So if anybody knows the correct model for a Tomy LSI LCD from 1982, please leave it in the comments below. Before I show you the testing of this though, let's go back to the ramen footage one more time.
The hot sauce of the packet lingers at the bottom. So this is the hottest part. But I'm trying to be thorough. What would you say? I'm done? Mm-hmm. There we go. Double X ramen. Well-deserved glass of milk.
And let me tell you all, that glass of milk didn't help a whole lot because an hour later, I was still feeling it. In fact, I had to eat several green tea mochi ice cream just to finally cool down my mouth a little bit. But I got through it, and you all stuck with me getting through it, so somehow I survived the ordeal. Let's go back to the Tomytronic Pac-Man. Now, to say this is a simplistic version of Pac-Man would be an understatement. Even when you set it to Pro mode, the most ghosts that you will find in this maze at any time is 3. And the dots can only be eaten going right to left. If you traverse them going the opposite direction, it doesn't even register as a hit. So this is Pac-Man at its most primitive presentation, and yet it is also incredibly addictive. Once you understand those limitations and work within them, you quickly find yourself wanting to play it over and over again and do progressively better at eating the ghost monsters, collecting the cherries, which is also the only fruit you can get, and achieve the highest score possible. If you're looking for one though, be sure to get it in good condition because many have faded LCD screens, battery covers that are missing, battery contacts that are corroded. You want one that's in as nice as possible condition, even without all of the stickers on it. Unless you have a friend like Fix-It Phil who can help you replace those things. And a big shout out to Phil for that. I always appreciate all the effort he puts into making repairs and getting things back into working condition. He is a genius at that. So, love you, Phil. Much respect. But now, let's go back to the ramen eating Mr. MegaManFan for a final word.
Thank you for watching. This has been the Double X Hot Ramen Spicy Food Challenge.